Hey guys, Dave Chang here. If you see me and I've worn the same clothes for a bunch of podcasts, it's because we're banking this. It is summer. There's quite a bit of work being done. I'm going on a few holiday days with my family, so we're trying to do some podcasts in advance. So thank you. And whenever you do this, it's always a good time when you're banking podcasts to have stuff that might be evergreen. And we are blessed to have a lot of Ask Dave questions, and that's what we're going to get to in 1 second. Welcome to the Dave Chang Show, part of the Ringer Podcast Network, presented by Major Domo Media. Thank you, Yola Tango, as always. This is an Ask Dave session. I'm joined with Dave, the producer. You can keep on sending your questions at Ask Dave. You can hashtag Ask Dave on Instagram. You can join us on the Discord channel. The community there is vibrant. And you can also check out full episodes and clips of the show on the YouTube channel at The Dave Chang Show, and catch up on Recipe Club on Spotify on our YouTube channel at Recipe Club Official. Stay tuned for more episodes. And I can only tell you that there's, I wouldn't say significant changes coming, but changes that we have been talking about are now in process. And when we come back from break, things are going to be full on. We're going to have Dinner Time Live coming back, and we're going to have Amazon Thursday Night Football. So my schedules are going to get insane. But one thing I want to assure you is my priority is going to be this podcast. And I'll talk more about that moving forward. But for now, let's get into Ask Dave. Dave, what do we got?
Okay, so this first one, I get to read these, and I am going to butcher some of the
That's why I wanted you to read
them. So our first Ask Dave for today is from, I think it's pronounced Anne, from Liverpool. Majordomo level 7, whose favorite dish to make, this is where I get into trouble, is I believe it's bún bò, which is a Vietnamese rice noodle dish with sliced beef and pork knuckles and stuff. The bucket list restaurant for them is the next Noma pop-up. And the question is, which is your favorite Chef's Table episode and why?
Good question. Favorite Chef's Table. So just so you know, Chef's Table is the longest running TV show in Netflix history. Little known fact. Ted Sarandos loves food, and it's one of his passion projects. It really did take all the great things that you might see on PBS, the great chefs of Europe, the Southwest, or whatever, and sort of condense it and add food porn and music. Everyone knows the sort of soundtrack to that. In terms of my favorite episodes, I'll be honest, I have not seen all of them for the same reason I haven't seen The Bear, up until recently. Like, I know all of these people. So sometimes it's just weird to I'm like I see them not all the time, but there was a period where I'd see them all the time. So it was just weird. Like I just couldn't do it. I would say, not because he's my close friend and a lot of my friends have been on it, my favorite episode to this day is still Chris Bianco's pizza episode. He's the only one that's been on. Yes, the pizza, and pizza has had, Anne from Minneapolis, and there's all these other pizzaiolos. But like, to me, Chris is the godfather of American pizza. He has single-handedly changed the sort of trajectory of what pizza is. That seems like high praise because it's true. I think his sort of tinkering in the way he thinks and his ability to sort of change variables and ingredients and find the parallel from Italy to sort of Arizona tomatoes and sort of create this synthesis where it's American pizza, clearly Italian. It's really hard to put your fingerprints. And I've said this before when talking about Chris. I can close my eyes and eat his pizza, a margarita pizza, and know unequivocally that I'm eating his pizza. That is really fucking hard to do. You're talking about ingredients that everyone has had for the most part that I can think of in developed countries, and to be able to put your fingerprints on a food that is so synonymous, right, with just like cuisine, like eating pizza in all of its forms, and to sort of have signature flavors, to me, that is what is most impressive. And yes, everybody on there is fantastic, but I've long admired Chris well before I ever was a close friend of his, because here you have a guy that did it. He did it outside of the traditional sort of circles of cuisine. Brooklyn kid moving to Arizona and finding a way to make not just some of the best pizza, but some of the best food in the world. Pretty cool. And I think one of the reasons why I do like it more than the other chef's tables, it's relatable, right? Sometimes it's hard as a chef because you think that everything you're doing, everyone's going to make sense, right? Like another episode I like a lot is the Francis Mallman one. And by the way, Ann Kim's is great. They're all great. But like, you look at Francis Mallman, who's this legendary chef restaurateur, and you're like, when am I ever going to eat something like that? When am I going to have fish from the Argentina and cook it over all this wood? It looks sexy and poetic, but I find it awesome. But sometimes I wonder, can somebody that doesn't know anything about food relate to that? And the reason, again, why I like it, and I think where I'm focusing a lot of my efforts, just when we're doing anything media oriented, is if you're into food, you're not going to know all these stories anyway. I think what I would like to do is make sure that, how do you get people that don't give a shit about food to then care a little bit more? And I think Chris's story is a good sort of like entry point to go down the rabbit hole, so you can learn about Thomas Keller, you can learn about Jamie Oliver, you can learn about Alice Waters, you can learn about Jose Andres. So that's what I think. There are so many good ones. Anna Ross, also a good episode. She is a fantastic chef as well. So there's so many. I mean, I don't know how many fucking seasons there have been, but yeah.
That's great. Francis Mallman is also producer. Felipe is one of his favorites.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Next up, we've got Steven from Seattle, level 4, major domo scale. Steven's favorite dish to make is rolling out pasta or baguettes, something to space out on while making and able to give to someone when finished, which I think is sweet. The best meal that Steven's ever had was Il Corvo's Bolognese, which he found by accident during jury duty and was amazing, which was the Seattle restaurant from Chef Mike Easton. And then the question is, Steven loves ceramics and always adds to his collection of small bowls when he doesn't need any more. Excluding knives, what is or was your collection of things that you collected a bunch of in the kitchen?
Spoons. I mean, a lot of cooks collect spoons. Unequivocally with spoons, and I would collect spoons. I don't know if I'd say steal them, but sometimes you would see a spoon at any place, any shop around the world, and be like, that has a good well. Oh, that feels really nice in the hand. And if you know, you know. And having a good spoon, and something that's not a Kuhn spoon. And by the way, I think the first, second generations of Kuhn spoon way better than currently, and it's hard to, you'll know if you hold them. And Greg Kuntz, rest in peace, of L'Espinasse, Swiss chef. He invented it's his product, the Kuntz spoon, that you can get it from J.B. Prince. I'm sure you can get it on Amazon now, but not those spoons. It could be you were at your grandma's or your aunt's house and they have this old, 50-year-old spoon. You're going to take that spoon. Like, that's just what's going to happen. It also could be like a wooden spoon. A lot of cooks have like a specific wooden spoon that looks totally beaten to shit, but that's their risotto spoon. For me, it was spoons, for sure. Ceramics as plateware, there's so many, but I always love Le Bernardaud plateware. I thought, what Keller did with his line. He was probably the first person to do the plate on plate on plate with sort of matching like design was super cool. But overall, ceramics for the most part to me don't get better than what was happening in Korea. Korean ceramics to me are the best. A lot of people probably would say the Japanese, but a lot of those ceramicists were Korean originally. I mean, it's just true. They literally would steal people from the best pottery villages and bring them to Japan. So ceramics in Korea and Japan are just, on another level for me. And, to me, don't collect them because it's just too fragile. I don't want to fuck that shit up. And, I have broken one. That's why I got fired from the soba job when I was younger, because I chipped a national living treasure. That's what they call it in Japan. Like when you're like a Nobel Prize winner artist or some version like that, a Pulitzer Prize winning artist. That would be the sort of the equivalent. But in general, everyone has their thing. But I would say most cooks that I've worked with over the years collect spoons. I would say that many cooks just fucking steal spoons as well. I may or may not have done that a couple times. But currently, I don't have any spoons.
Don't feel bad about the living national treasure. I dropped the studio phone today, and now we need a new screen protector. Basically the same thing. Next up, we have David from Denver. Great name. Major Domo level is probably once again 7 out of 10.
Sevens, huh?
Yeah, but this one's been in restaurants and a home cook for most of his life. Now, a 7 out of 10 on Major Domo cooking, but an 8.5 out of 10 as a Major Domo eater, having traveled the world to eat at places like your own Momofuku, Central, Per Se, Arpege. Like, these are a lot of names that we get on this podcast. But David's question is, his wife and he have traveled way less since having a kid. If they were going to take a trip to a food destination, what would be good for like a shorter period trip? Where should they go for their next destination?
I mean, two places popped in mind. I think Peru would be one. I don't know. Has he been to Lima already? That would be cool. And I remember talking to Trevor Noah about it, and he's like, South Africa has got some of the most diverse cuisine in the world because of all the ethnicities and all the sort of merging of people there. And Cape Town has some of the best restaurants. So I just have never been there. So if I was going to go away, I've talked to my wife about that. That would be cool to spend some time there, just in general, eating. I've been to North Africa. I've never really been below that. And if I was going to, so I want to go to Lima, but if I had to really recommend something and it's not the normal go to Tokyo, go to Kyoto type of shit, go to Bangkok, I would truthfully, honestly tell people go to Istanbul. We were able to film one of the last episodes of Ugly Delicious there, and it was like titled As the Meat Turns, right? As a funny title, but we were talking about vertical spit cooking. Took us to Istanbul. Chris went to Beirut. Just a quick story. I was just, it's amazing to see literally the merger of Asia and Europe. And again, those are sort of the collisions that I'm just sort of fascinated by. And just the history of Constantinople to Istanbul, Christianity and Islam, and just the foodways are just so old and so varied and so delicious. I just thought it was one of the coolest places, one of the most beautiful cities. All the mosques and it's just so fucking stunning. And then the food matches it. And it's just such a fun way of eating down there. Some of my most favorite food memories are in a variety of restaurants, from eating on the street to eating at high-end restaurants to eating at sandwich shops, to drinking pickle juice and stuff like that. But, I remember talking to somebody down there, and I was eating pistachios, and it was a friend of a friend, and I was like, wow, these are just like, I think like these are like the best pistachios I've ever had. And they're like, yeah. It's like, why? Like, because we invented them. They're ours. So it's things like that where you're like, oh yeah, probably I never thought about it that way. It's just way older and way more. There's just a more vibrant food scene, and the markets, and you can see fish species that you've never seen, and you can see bread being made on this. It's just so fucking cool. And I would say Istanbul is one of my favorite cities to travel. I would love to spend another week there or two and just travel throughout Turkey in general. That would be my recommendation, is Turkey, Istanbul.
Very cool. Those were not the options that Felipe and I in the booth were.
What did you guys think?
I mean, Felipe, we obviously thought Chaban was top of the list, but just even, I don't know, haven't heard those names tossed around as food cities, which is really cool.
But you're just like you're eating like a shawarma, and you're looking at the sunset on the Hagia Sophia, and you're just like, where the fuck am I? You know, you're eating havla, and it's not like I'm an expert in it, but I'm like, why is this is like just all of the flavors are just so extraordinary. The quality of ingredients is at a different level, and being in America, you have to realize sometimes that there are cultures that are so much fucking older than America. It's a good reminder that we're a very small part of the foodways in the world.
Well, our next Ask Dave actually mentioned something similar. So this is Carrie from Lansing, who's a 4 working on their 5. Can they debone a fish or brunoise an onion? Hell no. But their favorite dish to make is the food scene in Michigan has exploded in just the last 20 years. But for a long time, Carrie says it was slim picking, so they had to learn to cook many of the foods they wanted to eat. As a result, their favorite things to cook are new things that they haven't tried cooking yet. Also, another bucket list meal of Alinea, which is much closer usually to Lansing than LA. But Carrie's question is about hand washing. How does hand washing work in a kitchen during service? And how is the risk of cross-contamination minimized with the need to cook and serve efficiently, which is something I too have wondered.
Shout out Michigan. That Michigan is actually the state that was the catalyst for major food porn because of the 5-year engagement. Still, I'd say one of my favorite sort of non-food movies. But going back to the question, thank you for sending that in. Carrie from Lansing. Hand washing. Okay. It was funny when the pandemic started, and remember people were like sending each other like hand washing videos. I was like, yeah, that's how you're supposed to wash your hands. I'm a relatively paranoid person in general, and being a restaurant owner, you're always worried about foodborne illness. I've gotten a lot of trouble with the health department. We've told this story before. It's been in the book. Christina Tosi and I met that way because I yelled at the health department because I was the very first restaurant in New York State to get fucked on cooking and storing in sous vide. So I had to do a lot of work. So because of that, to get out of the hole I was in, I really had to kiss ass, and I really had to take all these extra classes about sanitation. And I feel like I know more about it than anything else in my life sometimes. And it's knowledge that is important. And by the way, it's now, I believe, a requirement. But before it was a requirement, if you were going to be a sous chef or an owner, you had to pass health certification class. I believe in the Bear in Chicago, they all had to take that class as well. But in New York, it was a requirement for management. Now I believe at some point it's a requirement for everybody. So it's like getting a driver's test. You have to study these things, and they test you on foodborne illness. They teach you on sanitation. They teach you on cross-contamination. They teach you about food handling. The reason this is important is quite simple. It's like if you mishandle food, you have the possibility of hurting somebody. And nobody wants that. And more importantly, with a lot of the stuff that's in our food from the oceans and, whether it's from pollutions or global warming because of like red algae or shit like that, things that look pristine and safe may not be. This is very difficult. It's why there's, warnings on a menu. Eating this may be blah, 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 blah. Not good for older people and pregnant women or expecting or something like that. The reason being is there's a lot of things out there that if you consume, you can get quite ill. I believe the stat was 99% of all foodborne illnesses because somebody didn't wash their hands properly. That's a crazy stat, but that happens all the time. It happens all the time, and it's not being negligent, just mistakes happen, right? If you read Atul Gawande's Checklist Manifesto, great book, I recommend it, surgeons not washing their hands properly are one of the reasons why there were infections on IVs and shit. So if a doctor's not doing it right, then we're all fucked. It just so happens that kitchens might be busy. Sometimes it's nobody's fault, right? Which is why in a kitchen, you want to have it organized. You want raw foods on the bottom of a walk-in being the refrigerator that you literally walk in, and anything that's raw or vegetable or fruit as far away from the raw. Ideally, you have a meat fridge, and ideally you have a separate veg and fruit fridge, so they're not even in the same vicinity. You also might have colored cutting boards, red for meat, green for vegetables, blue for fish. You also have bleach solution. If you do, say, 2% of water and bleach, I believe it's 2%, changes different states, and you wipe down everything, that's going to help kill a lot of the pathogens and anything that's a bacteria that might be harmful. And also, you're constantly scrubbing down in a kitchen. I don't think it's an exaggeration. Working in a professional kitchen is probably 15%, depending on the kind of kitchen. Actual cooking. The rest is organizing, and the rest is cleaning. That's like minimum 85% cleaning, and organizing, and prepping, which I don't consider necessarily cooking. But so much of it is cleaning, and any good kitchen in the world is going to look clean. But at times it might get dirty. Mistakes happen. Football players fumble the ball. It just, shit happens. So you put plans in place, which is why there's this thing called HACCP plan. That's Hazard Analysis Control, Certified Control Plan. So it was developed by NASA of all things. So every time, and you have an SOP, your standard operating procedure. So if you want to cook or use cook in vacuum in New York City, you have to follow this. Every thing that comes, and also I believe Las Vegas has the most stringent health department codes, because think about it, if you're cooking in a casino, you could get a lot of people ill. Everything that comes into the kitchen that's a raw ingredient, and if you get like onions in, you have to know every version, what time, where it's at, who the purveyor is, who handled it, who received it. So the receiving is like who took the order of onions into the restaurant, and then after they're there, who preps them, who washes them, and what dishes that onion now is in. So you have this mother book of everything that from the start to the finish, and you can sort of locate the origin of every step of the way that onion was handled by a human. It's a pain in the fucking ass to do. It's so labor intensive. But it provides accountability. I almost can't see it any other way now because I've been brainwashed to think that way. You don't obviously have to cook that way. But ultimately, restaurants have accountability and systems, standard operating procedures, so you don't, right? Like you're never going to put raw meat on top of, say, your salad greens in a fridge. It might happen, but you are told not to. You're also told, hey, don't cross-contaminate. If you're butchering sort of a pig, all right, I'm not going to do it next to the person that's prepping broccolini, right? It's pretty common sense, right? And then after you do that, you're going to wash it. You're going to probably wash it again. And if you're really anal, you're going to run it through the dishwasher. And then you're going to scrub it down with bleach solution. That's pretty much what you do. So if you're doing your job it should theoretically, I'm not going to say never happen, but it reduces the percentage that foodborne illness is going to happen. I will say that's interesting. I want just to answer the question. That's how you minimize it. You need to know exactly your place. This is your mise en place. This is your role. This is everything that you touch, and you have full accountability of everything. And again, like sometimes it just happens. Like this is why oyster tags, when you get oysters in, we had this with Ari of Found Oyster as well in Queen Street. You collect every shellfish tag. So you buy shellfish, or particularly oysters or clams, the origin, the time, and who handled it. It's part of the HACCP plan. Because sometimes, even if it looks perfect, there might be something you can't detect. Things are microscopic. So even if you do everything right, and we have had some of the best restaurants in the world, unfortunately be plagued, knock on wood, with like norovirus and shit like that came from food. Like you just can't be 100% perfect. All I can tell you is the best restaurants, and not even the best restaurant, anybody that gives a shit is going to do their best to minimize cross-contamination. Full stop. I will say that in this class that I had to take the Golden Apple Health class, just as a reminder, if you are in a place that you feel like maybe the food handling isn't safe, this was told to me by one of the head people in New York City, just order everything deep fried or in a pizza oven. The reason being deep fried, not because it's fried, is because more than likely it was held in a freezer. And that is a safe place to hold food. And because it's frozen, you're not going to let it spoil, because more than likely the percentage chance of it being mishandled is low. And then even if you do mishandle it, you throw it in the fryer, I think you're going to be good. The other thing that I thought I was surprised, because there were so many stories they would say, I was surprised. They would say order pizza, because the temperature that, say, a Neapolitan pie or even, say, a normal pizza over, say, 500 degrees plus is going to cook most foodborne pathogens and kill it. So I've never forgot that. If I'm in a place where I'm like, I don't know what the kitchen looks like, I almost always order something that's deep fried, which is great because I love chicken fingers and I also love pizza. So it works out. All right, what's next?
Next, we're going to get a little deep. This is Chris from Flushing, New York. Level 8, an amateur. I'm not sure those go hand in hand, but grew up in Korean-owned Mexican restaurants in the South Bay. Favorite dish to make is a Korean Mexican, aka Los Angeles-styled, build-your-own-adventure taco bar with marinated chicken thighs, spicy pork shoulder steaks, bulgogi marinated skirt steaks. This all sounds so good. Furikake, avocado, Tillamook cheddar, sour cream, Momofuku chili crunch on the side, no salsa, caramelized kimchi. But the best meal that Chris has ever had is his Italian mother-in-law's stuffed shells, and craves the breakfast sandwich at Tommy's Burger too. The question is, as a bicultural Korean American who grew up in LA in the 90s, Chris has struggled with feeling like belonging in both Korean and Korean American cultures, and was struck by your conversations with Ed Lee and Roy Choi recently, and wanted to ask a fairly personal question, which is, what are the qualities that you saw in your parents that you want to cultivate in your kids, and how do you try to encourage that growth without being annoyed by it?
Well, Chris, I think this is the most detailed question we've ever had, or even response to the major domoing everything. So thank you. 8 is a pretty high number, not going to lie. But thank you for not just doing another 7. I myself gave a fucking 7 for fishing. But, I was talking to someone recently that I love quite a lot. And they're going through the process right now of understanding their Korean parents. And I'd say you could extrapolate this to any immigrant kids, and I'm sure any parents in general. I've been doing behavioral therapy or psychiatric therapy for 25 years now, 26 years. 20 of those years were unraveling the fuckery of your parents, right? Most modern psychology, Freud, Jung, or whatever, was based on your parents. So it's not a surprise that a lot of who you are, your behavior, your idiosyncratic stuff, your neurotic behavior stems from your parents. It took me a long time to sort of forgive them. A long time. And again, some ways I love them more, in some ways I hate them more, but regardless, I've actually just been like, I understand it now. My mom had 4 kids. She didn't speak English. She moved here when she was like 22 years old in Virginia, of all places. My dad had the most miserable life working as a dishwasher in New York City and along the Eastern Seaboard. Like, how the fuck were they going to raise kids? So I have a deeper well of understanding and at times sympathy. And I think that's what I think about now as a father. Both my parents have passed. So sometimes when I talk to my kids, they have both of my wife's parents. And I'm so grateful for that. I wish I could give them the ability to see the fucking grit and perseverance. I don't know how to do that. You know, their lives were so fucking hard. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I think you can have this question, whether you're an immigrant kid or biracial kid or not. Like, how do you introduce just enough of hindrance, just enough of irritation where, you know, growth happens? I have no idea. That, Chris, is a question that I don't know, but particularly for myself, that's what I love. My 2 sons, Hugo and Gus, you know, they are going to live a life that their grandparents and their grandparents before them lived so they could do what they need to do. And it's going to be difficult in a different way. But I know, and I can imagine, you know, or I could just also imagine like anybody that's like a Korean with Korean parents that immigrated in the 70s, early 80s or whenever, it's like, they had like a deep well of grit and perseverance. And I wonder how the hell to introduce that in a way that won't be damaging, scarring, or traumatic. And, you know, in terms of encouraging growth without them being annoyed by it, I got to be honest, I'm just fucking annoying. This is the hard part. And I always use this idea of a constitution quite a bit. For those that work with me, unfortunately, they hear it all the fucking time. You know, and I've learned this from being a chef that was overbearing and totalitarian, and I've also learned it from being someone that was too laissez-faire and totally hands-off. You can get people to do anything you want either way, but it's just like when your back is turned and they are by themselves, and more importantly, I always judge it, what kind of decision making, anybody can make a right decision under perfect circumstances. Whatever you're teaching a cook or to your kids, can they make the right decision under duress? And that to me is sort of the testament. And ultimately I feel like I just have to sort of live that life. But, you know, as a parent, I've thought about all these metaphors and analogies. Like, the worst thing you ever want is your child to get hurt, cut themselves, fall down. You know, I don't know how many times I've been in the fucking hospital already because one of my kids sort of like almost busted their head open. Nothing pains you more than to see your kids hurt. But at the same time, if you're just hovering over them all the time so they don't get hurt, you're actually maybe potentially doing more long-term damage than not. So it's just like teaching them the ability to operate in a world that's moral, that's righteous, that's ethical, whatever. And, you know, if they want to leave those boundaries, then you can have those conversations. But I think the hardest part is letting them just sort of live their life. And they're their own people. They're going to figure it out on their own, God willing. And that's all you can do. It's that's the hardest part about being a parent so far for me, is not interfering, not being a fucking overbearing parent like my fucking parents were themselves. Anyway, I think I hopefully answered your question. Chris, thank you for sending that in. What do we got next, Dave?
Now, I thought that was very moving. Next is probably going to be a little less moving. From Ruben from London, originally from Spain, though. Of course, Majordomo level 7. Been cooking for years. Like they say, practice makes perfect.
We should just get rid of it. Just say, are you a 7 or not?
Are you a 7 or not? Ruben's friends often says that Ruben cooks restaurant quality food, though that might just be because they're English and not used to bold flavors. Ruben's bucket list meal is Musso and Frank's as soon as they're back in LA. But the best meal that Ruben's ever had, they actually went to WD50 back in 2006. And the most recent best meal was at a Poniente, which is a radical, mind-bending approach to seafood, they say. Now, this question is, I've been wondering about this for years. Maybe it's a bit controversial, but I finally decided to ask the experts. Why is it that top chefs who spend their lives sourcing the best, most flavorful ingredients on earth seem to love bland lagers and burnt cheap coffee so much?
Ruben, thank you for that. Yes, I will always be the champion for WD50 and Wiley Dufresne. You can go visit his stuff at Stretch Pizza. I just think he opened another shop at the Domino Pizza Factory out in Brooklyn. And WD50, for me, is the most important restaurant of the past 25 years. No question about it, in America. And we should get Wiley back on the pod soon enough. It's a good question about chefs who are always eating the best and procuring the best and working with the finest shit, wanting like cheap shit. Like, again, one of the funniest moments I say the bear is you see that with Carm when he's working with all this nice shit and he comes back home and he just makes a peanut butter jelly sandwich. I don't know if this is going to make sense, but whenever I make food at home, and it's something that I saw with my mother, she would never eat the food that she makes. Whenever I cook something, I don't want to eat it, right? I think there's something about being immersed in a world, just because I think this is important for me to sort of state, because it's a reminder for me. The reason cooks work at the fanciest, most prestigious and restaurants where like the uber fucking rich go is not because they want to be like them. It is a place where they can get their hands on the best ingredients and practice the best techniques and have the most ambition. That has changed over the past 20 years, where now you have a variety of restaurants at different price points that use really nice ingredients. But for the most part, that's still the same. You're surrounded with luxury and caviar and truffles and all this other stuff, depending on the restaurant you're at. Not that defines luxury, but just at some point when you're out of the kitchen, that's the last thing you want to touch. I mean, just the thought of it, I'm like, ugh, you know? The value is what you prescribe to it, right? So, I mean, this is maybe seem like a non sequitur story, but I feel like I might have told the story before on this podcast years ago. But when I was in Milan, I was with Andrea Petrini. We were with Massimo and Renee, and we were just having this fabulous dinner in Milan at this local trattoria. And the owner of the restaurant, the mother, just brings out this wheel of Gorgonzola Dolce, and she just destroys it with this grapefruit-sized wheel of ball of. It's the biggest white truffle I've ever seen. And I've said this, I know I have. That it just didn't make sense to me. I was like, that's just a waste. How could you do that? Little did I know that I thought it was going to be overpowering. It was sublime. It just was magic. All right. And the conversation ensued as she sat down, and she's like, I don't give a shit about truffles. You know, when she grew up with the war, she wanted potatoes. Truffles were like nothing. Potatoes were the value. So part of it is like what you're, ascribing value towards. And I don't think that a lot of cooks, just because they work with wealthy, luxurious ingredients, think that they're inherently better. You know, it's the work, it's the technique, it's the vision that sort of shapes that together. And taking raw ingredients and manufacturing it and really sort of, almost using your will to shape it into a dish with coaxing flavors, and the juxtaposition of ingredients is something that is not just delicious, but artful. You don't want to do that all the time. Sometimes you just want a peanut butter jelly sandwich when you leave the kitchen. And also it's like, these fucking things are super expensive. Like, most cooks don't have the means. Most people don't have the means to eat caviar and foie gras. And honestly, like, I would never want to eat foie gras at home, ever. It's disgusting to me, right? Caviar is one thing, but every once in a while. But bland lagers and burnt cheap coffee so much. Let me say this. I would have 10 years ago, 15 years ago said, yes, every chef wants that. That's not true. There are chefs that want super nice shit. And there are definitely a lot of people in the business that work with these ingredients that want the finest beers and the finest wines and the finest whiskeys and the most bespoke single origin coffee, like, it is there. I was wrong in making that assumption. I am one of those people that like watery down beer, even though I drink mostly Athletic these days, and cheap coffee just because I needed the caffeine. So yeah, I think there's something to the secret sauce of you just don't want to. You smell it all the time. You don't necessarily want to eat it as well. So there it is.
This is from yet another David from Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. A level 6. We've finally got a 6. And David's favorite thing to make is ropa vieja and Cuban rice. Ropa vieja, which Garrett Cole.
Shout out Garrett Cole.
Shout out
really
Garrett Cole.
Smacked us down with his food knowledge.
Really did. And David's bucket list meal is at Swan's Oyster Depot. David's question is, what do you think American food will look like in 50 years?
Well, David, good question. I think about this a lot. A couple podcasts ago, we talked about how London, whether you like Gymkhana or not, I think it's delicious. I talked to a friend recently that's more from southern India, and he's like, not for him because it's too meat-centric, it's too heavy. Again, to each his own. But if anything, weirdly enough, again, most food ways and culture are sort of mashed together by force. And whether you like it or not, that's just, when you eat food, that's just what has happened. I have this genuine belief that deliciousness will win out. And it wants to survive. And it's going to find any way humanly possible. I think I developed that idea when I was doing all that stuff for when we had a lab and we're teaching this Harvard class and, really understanding the science of microbiology and fermentation. And, the idea of I was like, why does koji, Aspergillus oryzae, which is the mold that gives us misos and sakes and soy sauce and all these beautiful things, and it can change rice into something that's floral and fragrant and just beautiful. Why does that survive? Because it's trying to literally, the mold is trying to survive, and literally if you just change like a tiny fucking part of the DNA, it's a mold that will kill you. And that's also trying to survive. So what I'm basically trying to say is anything that is delicious, in my opinion, is going to continue to evolve. The food of Mexico, queso relleno, this merger of Spanish food. And Spanish food was a merger of the Moors, and you have North African cuisine and stuff that happened in Spain itself. And then you have this cheese from the Dutch, and then you have local Mayan culture, and you have this beautiful, strange concoction. I think that's where food's going. In general, it's going to continue to morph and merge and evolve in beautiful ways that ultimately I think is going to break down, theoretically, I hope, what people think food could be. At the same time, with all this progress of the past 25 years, America's still a fucking steakhouse town. Every city wants to say, well, then maybe the exception. I would still say even Chicago. Every city, including fucking New York and LA, we're still steakhouse country. So that's not going to go away. We're not going to give up steaks and potatoes and palm puree. But I do think you're going to see. I'll end on this one example. You can't see it on Hulu anymore, but the next thing you eat, we went to a restaurant in the South Bay, and it was Mexican sushi. And there's a part of Mexico, oh my God, I'm blanking on it right now, by the coast, and there's a ton of Japanese restaurants. the owners of these restaurants, the chefs, all used to work for Matsuhisa Nobu. So what's a surprise, right? So like they come from a coastal town with a lot of fish. They wind up working in America at a Japanese restaurant that's actually not Japanese. He's Peruvian. Peruvian, you know, indigenous food, Japanese. It's just a beautiful mix of shit. And then next thing you know, it's natural for you might have a maki roll and it's got, you know, flavors from like Western Mexico in it. Like, I think that I would bet so much money that eventually something like that will be mainstream, and you're going to see that at your Stop and Shop or your Whole Foods, where instead of just being a spicy tuna roll, it's going to be one with jalapenos escabeche and, you know, I mean, something else, right? And that's what happens. Things get replaced and ingredients change, but deliciousness remains the same. And I think America is just going to be continuing to be this melting pot. And I don't know if what I said makes sense, but that's just what happens. All I can guarantee you is things are going to remain the same and things are going to be really different. But the food that looks different is still going to taste good. Anyway, I appreciate it, guys. Thank you for sending in these questions. We did not get to all of them. We will announce the winner soon. We are going to be putting a lot of work into making these prizes better. We're going to announce the grand prize very, very soon. Keep on sending those questions to Ask Dave. Join us on the Discord channel, and you can sign up for that at majordomo.com. We have a lot of TV stuff coming out with Netflix and Amazon, and we're going to be really focusing a lot of our efforts on this podcast as we move to the studio and start recording there. Hope everyone's having a great summer. Give us 5 stars.